TIFU by accidentally giving my boss a very inappropriate gift at her company holiday party. So, this happened last week, and I'm still processing it. The entire situation still feels like a fever dream. I can't believe I somehow managed to screw up this badly, but here we are. Let me walk you through it. I work at a mid-sized marketing firm. It's a pretty chill company, but still corporate enough to have the usual holiday parties and gift exchanges. Every year, we do a Secret Santa exchange, and this year I was assigned to buy a gift for my boss, Karen. Now, let me start by saying that Karen is, how do I put this, not the easiest person to shop for. She's the kind of boss who is always very professional at work, keeps to herself, and doesn't really give much insight into her personal preferences. So when I drew her name out of the hat, I immediately started stressing about what to get. The last thing I wanted was to give her something that looked cheap or thoughtless. I spent days agonizing over it, doing some deep research into her likes and dislikes. I asked a few coworkers who had been around longer and had a better read on her. One coworker, Sarah, mentioned that Karen was really into yoga, which seemed like a solid lead. Another mentioned that Karen had been talking about wanting to get into aromatherapy. I figured I could combine both interests and get her something unique, an essential oils diffuser, but with a twist. I found this beautiful, modern-looking diffuser online that had some pretty rave reviews. It was sleek, had a minimalistic design, and came with a set of high-end essential oils. It seemed like a thoughtful, upscale gift. In my mind, it was the perfect thing. Not too personal, but still well thought out. So I bought it, wrapped it up, and was feeling pretty good about myself. Now, let me explain the twist that I didn't realize would come back to haunt me. The diffuser I bought had a feature where it also doubled as a mood lighting device. It had different color options that you could cycle through to create a calming atmosphere. Of course, I thought this was a cute touch, and in my mind, it made the gift feel even more personalized and sophisticated. What I didn't realize was that the color options also included a deep, fiery red that, when combined with the diffuser's misting effect, could look, well, like something else entirely. The night of the party arrived, and I was feeling a little nervous but excited. The venue was a nice restaurant with a private dining room, and everyone was dressed up in their holiday best. The party kicked off with food, drinks, and a lot of awkward mingling. I finally saw Karen, and she looked beautiful in her sleek black dress, standing by the drinks table talking to a couple of her colleagues. Eventually, the Secret Santa gift exchange began. I had no idea who had me, and I wasn't expecting anything great, but I was anxious to see the reactions to my gift. I watched as people exchanged their presents, trying to gauge what was considered a good gift. Some people got a cute mug, others got fancy pins or small gadgets. It all seemed pretty standard. Finally, it was my turn. I walked up, holding the gift in my hands, and gave it to Karen with a smile. She looked a little surprised at first, but her reaction quickly turned into one of genuine appreciation. "Oh, this is so thoughtful. I've been meaning to get into aromatherapy. You really did your homework." She smiled warmly, and I felt a rush of relief. She even gave me a hug, which caught me a bit off guard but was a nice gesture. Now, I should probably clarify something. Our office is mostly pretty conservative. Sure, people drink at the holiday party, but it's not the kind of place where things ever get rowdy. So, when Karen started opening the gift, I didn't think much of it. That is, until she pulled out the diffuser, and then that's when things started going sideways. As she turned the device over in her hands, she accidentally hit the button that activated the lighting feature. The diffuser immediately started emitting a soft red glow, which looked a bit strange. I felt my stomach drop a little. I had no idea it was going to do that, and I definitely didn't think the red lighting was appropriate in a professional setting. To make matters worse, the mist started to billow out in a very exaggerated, almost smoke-like fashion, and it began to take on a subtle red hue as it swirled around. Karen, bless her heart, looked momentarily stunned. Then, as the mist expanded and the red light filled the room, I could tell she was trying to suppress a laugh. But then, she looked at me with this half-smile that I couldn't read, and she said, This is interesting." That's when I started to panic. I had no idea how to explain that I didn't mean to give her something that looked like it was straight out of a very different kind of party, one that didn't involve any aromatherapy at all. My mind went blank, and I awkwardly tried to salvage the situation. Yeah, it's meant to be relaxing, I stammered. The red light is, I think it's a kind of mood thing, like for a calm atmosphere. Karen's expression softened, but the rest of the room was staring at her, watching her reaction. She smiled politely, but didn't quite know how to respond to the awkwardness of the situation. The rest of the party was uncomfortable, and I could feel myself sweating. Someone in the back of the room laughed nervously, and then someone else chimed in with, "That looks like a sex toy." That's when I knew this gift had gone horribly, horribly wrong. Karen, being the professional that she is, kept a straight face, but it was clear that she was holding back laughter. "I'm sure it'll be great for my yoga sessions," she said, as if trying to defuse the situation. But at that point, I realized that the damage was done. I had just accidentally given my boss what looked like an erotic gift, something no one, especially my boss, should receive at a company holiday party. The entire room was now awkwardly quiet, and all I could do was shrink back into my chair, hoping the earth would swallow me whole. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I don't even remember who won the office trivia game or what we ate for dinner. All I could think about was the red mist swirling in the air and the awkward silence that had followed it. I could tell that Karen was trying to avoid looking at me directly after that, and I don't blame her. The next day at work, things were strained. No one mentioned the incident directly, but I could feel the tension every time I passed by Karen's office. It wasn't until a few days later that she called me into her office. My heart dropped when I saw the diffuser on her desk. She smiled warmly and said, "You really did put some thought into this. But, I think I'll stick with my usual candle for now." I tried to laugh it off, apologizing profusely, but she just smiled and told me not to worry about it. Still, the memory of the red mist and the look on her face will haunt me forever. TLDR, I accidentally gave my boss a diffuser that looked like it belonged at an adult theme party instead of a corporate holiday party. It was awkward. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by accidentally sending a personal confession to my boss instead of my girlfriend. So, I've been seeing this girl for a few months now. She's amazing, funny, smart, caring, and just one of those people who you meet and immediately feel like you've known them your whole life. I'm kind of an awkward guy, so it took me a while to feel comfortable with her. But after a few weeks, we got pretty serious, and I started feeling like I want to tell her how much she meant to me. We've only been texting each other for a little while, but I already found myself looking forward to every message she sent. Every time she'd text me, I would try to put together the perfect response, which, knowing me, was always a struggle. I'm not exactly smooth, and sometimes I second-guess myself over things that probably don't even matter. But with her, it felt different. I wanted to be open, honest, and show her how I felt. So one night, after a long day at work, I decided I was going to send her this huge, heartfelt message to let her know how much she meant to me. I wanted to tell her I was falling for her, that I appreciated how patient she'd been with me as I opened up, and that I was excited about the future with her. You know, all those gushy, sweet things that are supposed to make the girl swoon. I thought it was the perfect opportunity. I spent a good hour crafting the message. I didn't want to rush it. I typed out everything I was feeling, reread it about 100 times, and even had a friend look it over to make sure it didn't sound too weird. Then, when I was finally satisfied, I hit send and sat back, waiting for her response. I felt a wave of relief and excitement wash over me. I thought, this is it. This is the start of something amazing. But then my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my boss. I hadn't been expecting anything from him at that time, and I assumed it was a quick work-related thing. I opened the message without thinking much of it, and before I could even process what was going on, my screen froze. It was the message I had just sent, except instead of being sent to my girlfriend, it had gone to my boss. I had just sent my most personal confession to my boss. Now, you may be thinking, okay, maybe it was just a simple mistake. But here's the kicker. I work at a mid-sized company with a fairly small team, and my boss is someone I have a pretty close working relationship with. He's a chill guy, but not that chill. In fact, he's the type of boss who likes to keep things professional. And I don't mean in a let's keep the workplace cool, but still professional kind of way. I mean, this is the guy who once gave a whole speech about keeping a healthy work-life balance and not mixing personal stuff into the office. He's old school. So, after I realized what I'd done, I immediately panicked. My heart was racing, and I felt a cold sweat break out all over me. My mind was running at 1,000,000 miles per hour, trying to figure out what to do. How could I possibly fix this? My confession to my boss was full of details about how I felt like I was falling for her, how she made me feel complete, and how I was really excited to see where things would go with her. The worst part? I signed off the message with a stupid "love you, babe." I froze. What do I even say now? How do I undo this? I stared at my phone for what felt like hours, just in complete disbelief. The reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. This was not a minor mistake. This was catastrophic. There was no way to explain it away. How could I tell my boss, "Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to confess my undying affection to you"? I tried calling my girlfriend, but of course, she didn't pick up. She was probably asleep by then. I texted her instead, asking her to call me as soon as she woke up because I needed to tell her something important. But that didn't help me in the immediate moment. My boss had already read the message, and now I had no idea what kind of awkwardness I was about to face at work the next day. I spent the next 20 minutes pacing around my apartment, wondering how to salvage this. I contemplated just texting my boss right now to explain what happened, but then I realized that try to play it off as a mistake was probably just going to make it worse. He was going to wonder why I was texting him about my personal life in the first place, and that would just raise even more red flags. Plus, I was going to have to face him in person tomorrow anyway, so the anticipation was making it even worse. At that point, there was nothing left to do but wait. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my boss. I took a deep breath and opened it, expecting some cold, professional response. Instead, it was a short message that read, "Hey, I think you sent that message to the wrong person. It's no big deal, but just wanted to let you know." I stared at the message for a moment, trying to understand what I was reading. He wasn't mad. He wasn't going to fire me. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or even more embarrassed. I spent the whole day avoiding my boss at work, trying to sneak by him whenever I could. But he kept catching me in the hallways, giving me these strange looks like he was trying to figure out if I was still mortified or not. Later in the afternoon, I finally got a moment to talk to him one-on-one. He pulled me aside and said, "Look, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it, but if you ever need help navigating your personal life, I'm happy to offer advice. You just need to be careful about who you send messages to in the future." He chuckled awkwardly, clearly trying to make light of the situation. I felt my face turn beet red, and all I could do was nod and thank him for being understanding. As for my girlfriend, I finally managed to talk to her about it too. She thought it was hilarious and actually reassured me that she wouldn't hold it against me. But now, every time I see my boss at work, I can't help but wonder if he's silently judging my romantic life. I mean, I didn't exactly want him to know I was sending those kinds of messages. It's just not something you expect to come up in a work conversation. So yeah, that was the day I accidentally sent a love confession to my boss instead of my girlfriend. If you've ever wanted to know what it feels like to be publicly humiliated at work and in your personal life all at once, I highly recommend it. TIFU by accidentally turning my apartment into a small-scale fire hazard after trying to fix a simple plumbing issue. So here's the deal. I'm not exactly what you'd call a handyman. In fact, I'm pretty much the opposite of that. I can barely hang a picture straight, let alone attempt any actual home repairs. But, like most people, I tend to think that watching a few YouTube videos makes me more than qualified to take on any DIY project that comes my way. And, of course, that's where everything went terribly wrong. It all started when I noticed a small leak under my kitchen sink. The kind of thing that doesn't seem urgent at first, just a few drops of water collecting at the base of the pipes. But I've been renting this apartment for a while, and I figured it was high time I tackled the problem. I didn't want to call a plumber because, well, the thought of paying someone $100 just to tighten a few bolts seemed absurd. I could fix this, right? So I went to the local hardware store, picked up some basic plumbing tools, wrenches, pipe sealant tape, some rubber gaskets, and a ton of YouTube knowledge to guide me. When I got back, I stared at the pipes under my sink for a good 5 minutes, trying to remember what I'd seen in the video. It looked simple enough. Loosen the bolts, remove the old seals, put in the new ones, and voila, leak fixed. I got to work, turning off the water supply to the kitchen, just to be on the safe side, and started to unbolt the pipes. The moment I started loosening the first bolt, I heard the faintest hiss, followed by a short burst of water. I panicked, thinking that I'd somehow broken the entire plumbing system. But after a few seconds of frantic Googling, I realized it was normal, just a bit of residual water left in the pipes. Nothing to worry about. I carried on, determined to get this right. After some struggling, I managed to pull the pipes apart and remove the old seals, which were pretty much corroded to the point of no longer functioning. I threw them out, and with my new gaskets in hand, I began putting everything back together. My plan was simple: tighten the bolts, test the pipes, and call it a day. Well, that was the plan anyway. While I was in the middle of tightening the last bolt, I heard a sound that I can only describe as the pipes releasing a giant sigh of relief. I figured everything was back to normal, so I stood up, wiped my brow, and reached for the faucet handle to check if the leak was gone. But instead of the gentle sound of water trickling into the sink, there was an awful, wet gurgling sound. Before I could even process what was happening, I heard an unmistakable whoosh noise, followed by a steady stream of water pouring out from the side of the pipe where I just tightened everything. I swear, the look on my face must have been a mix of confusion and pure terror. Water was spraying all over the underside of the sink, splashing onto the cabinet and the floor. I quickly turned off the faucet, but the damage was already done. A good amount of water had soaked through the cabinet and dripped down onto the floor, making a pretty impressive puddle. I thought, okay, no big deal. I'll just grab some towels and clean this up. But as I knelt down to assess the situation, I realized something far worse was happening. The cabinet was, for reasons I can't quite explain, connected to the electrical wiring for my kitchen lights. As the water slowly crept toward the wires, I felt my stomach drop. This was a classic case of me ignoring the fundamentals of basic electrical safety, something I should have considered before diving into this DIY project. To make matters worse, I didn't have the foresight to shut off the power in the apartment. Now, I was standing in a puddle of water with exposed electrical wiring inches away. Panic set in. My brain raced through all the what-ifs. What if the water reached the wires? What if I got electrocuted? What if the whole apartment caught fire? In a mad frenzy, I scrambled to grab the nearest towel and desperately tried to soak up the water around the exposed wires. I also started to unplug everything from the kitchen counter, just in case the worst happened. I'm pretty sure I wasn't thinking clearly at that point, but the overwhelming feeling of dread had completely taken over. In my panic, I managed to knock over a bottle of dish soap, which spilled all over the floor and made everything slippery. I slipped on the wet tile, hitting my elbow so hard that I nearly knocked myself out. I didn't even have the presence of mind to check if the electrical system had been damaged. I was too busy trying to contain the water from further spreading. That's when I realized something even more terrifying. The kitchen ceiling light, which was connected to the same electrical circuit, began to flicker ominously. It flickered once, twice, then stayed dim. Oh God, the water had reached the wires. I could feel my heart racing, and I had no idea what to do. There was no way I was calling my landlord at that hour. Mostly because, well, I didn't want to be known as that tenant who flooded their own kitchen. In the midst of all this chaos, I remembered something from the YouTube videos. They always said to turn off the power at the circuit breaker if anything electrical was at risk. With my heart pounding, I bolted out of the kitchen, trying not to trip over my own feet, and ran to the breaker box in the hallway. As I flipped the switch to cut off the electricity, I could hear the sound of the kitchen light flickering and then going completely dark. I breathed a sigh of relief, but my kitchen was still a disaster. The pipes were still leaking, the floor was wet, and I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. I ended up calling a plumber in the morning. It turns out there was a simple fix, one that didn't involve the electrical system at all. The plumbing issue had nothing to do with the wiring, which was a huge relief, but the mess I'd created still needed some serious cleaning up. At the end of the day, I learned a valuable lesson. If you're not sure what you're doing, don't attempt it. Or at least get a professional in before you turn your kitchen into a water and wires hazard. And most importantly, don't trust YouTube to turn you into a plumber, unless you want to risk a very wet, stressful night. And that's how I went from attempting a simple plumbing fix to almost flooding my kitchen and electrocuting myself. Who knew DIY could be so eventful? TIFU by trying to impress my friends with a home-cooked dinner and nearly burning down my house in the process. So, this happened last night, and I'm still shaking my head at how much of a disaster it turned into. I've always been the type of person who likes to impress others. Whether it's with my extensive knowledge of random facts, my ability to solve puzzles at lightning speed, or my so-called chef skills, I tend to overestimate my abilities, especially when it comes to cooking. But I thought, hey, this time I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to cook a dinner that'll make everyone go, wow. It all started when I invited a few close friends over for a casual get-together. My girlfriend, Emily, had been telling me for weeks that I should try cooking something special for them. So I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to show off my skills. I've cooked before, sure, but this time I want to make something fancy, like impressively fancy. I decided I was going to whip up a homemade 3-course meal, a starter of bruschetta, a main of chicken marsala, and a dessert of chocolate lava cakes. I had never attempted any of these before, but I figured, how hard could it be? I watched a few YouTube tutorials, wrote out a shopping list, and made sure to grab every ingredient. I was feeling confident. Now, I have to admit, I've always been more of a wing-it type of cook. I don't always measure ingredients precisely and often rely on my intuition to guide me. And that's where things started to go south. I started with the bruschetta because I figured it would be the easiest and least risky of the 3 dishes. How hard is it to toast some bread, chop up tomatoes, and sprinkle some basil, right? I prepped everything, popped the bread in the oven to toast, and waited for the smell of garlic and olive oil to fill the air. And that's where I made my first mistake. I had set the oven temperature too high. By the time I realized it, the bread was already more charred than golden brown. I didn't want to admit defeat, so I quickly scraped off the burnt parts, hoping no one would notice. I laid the bread out, topped it with the tomato mixture, and called it rustic, a word that sounded a lot better than burnt. As I placed the bruschetta on the table, my friend arrived, and they were immediately drawn to the appetizer. I watched in horror as one of my friends took a big bite and nearly choked on the charcoal-like bread. I could see him trying to hide it, but it was too late. I laughed awkwardly, trying to cover up the awkwardness, and quickly moved on to the main course. The chicken marsala was the dish I was most excited about. I had this entire image in my mind of this beautiful, golden brown chicken served with a rich, savory mushroom sauce. It would be the star of the evening. I meticulously followed the recipe step by step, but of course I didn't account for the fact that I had only a single frying pan and not the correct tools for the job. I started with the chicken, searing it on both sides. No problem, I thought, as the sizzling sound was like music to my ears. But then, when it came time to add the marsala wine, I accidentally splashed it all over the place. Some of it splattered on the stove, while some splashed onto the counter and my shirt. A quick glance at my shirt confirmed what I feared. A giant red stain was slowly spreading across my favorite white t-shirt. Ignoring the shirt disaster, I moved on, but as I was simmering the sauce, the smell of something burning started to fill the room. Panic set in. I turned to the stove, only to realize I had turned the heat up too high. The wine had evaporated faster than it should have, and I could see the sauce beginning to burn at the bottom of the pan. I tried to salvage it, adding more wine and water, but now the flavor was all off. The chicken was overcooked, and the sauce was more bitter than savory. But I had committed to it, so I plated the dish and served it to my friends. As they dug in, I watched their expressions closely. I could see the hesitation in their eyes, the way they pushed the chicken around on their plates. One friend, David, who's always been kind of blunt, put his fork down after a few bites and said, "Is it supposed to taste like this?" Everyone else chimed in, agreeing that it was off. I tried to laugh it off and said something about acquired taste, but I could tell I was losing them. Emily, who had been so excited about this dinner, took a bite and looked at me with a mix of sympathy and concern. Now, at this point, I could have saved myself by just calling it quits, serving some ice cream, and pretending like it wasn't a big deal. But no, I had my eyes on that glorious chocolate lava cake. The dessert was going to save everything, I thought. Surely, no one could mess up a molten cake, right? Wrong. Oh, so wrong. I prepared the batter with confidence, followed the instructions precisely, and poured it into the ramekins. As they were baking in the oven, I realized I had forgotten to butter the inside of the ramekins, which meant the cakes would probably stick. But I had already committed, so I didn't bother to check. When the timer went off, I grabbed the ramekins, ready for my big moment. The cakes came out looking, well, not perfect, but decent enough. The top was cracked, but that's what they're supposed to look like, right? I flipped one over, and it plopped onto the plate with a thud. When I cut into it, nothing happened. No molten chocolate poured out. It was like a dry, sad brownie. The inside was completely cooked through, and the only thing that leaked out was a bit of overcooked batter. I forced a smile and served them to my friends anyway. At this point, they were too polite to refuse, but I could see them trying to hide their disappointment. They still ate it, though. I guess the chocolate was at least somewhat edible, even if it wasn't lava cake. By the end of the night, I had learned several valuable lessons. First, I will never again try to cook a multi-course meal without better preparation. Second, never trust a recipe that promises molten anything unless you're confident in your cooking skills. Third, my friends are way too nice to tell me the truth about how terrible everything was. So, to wrap it up, my house didn't burn down, but my ego sure did. I ended the night in my now wine-stained shirt, tried to laugh off the disaster, while Emily took pity on me and promised we'd try again. Maybe just a pizza next time. TLDR, tried to cook a fancy dinner for my friends to impress them. Burned the bruschetta, ruined the chicken marsala, and made chocolate lava cakes that didn't flow. My friends were too polite to tell me the truth, but I knew it was a disaster. TIFU by accidentally causing a massive office-wide email disaster and nearly losing my job because of it. I work for a medium-sized tech company, and like most places, we rely heavily on email to communicate. One of my job responsibilities includes sending out the monthly newsletter to the entire company. It's not glamorous work, but it's important for keeping everyone in the loop. Usually it's just a few updates, birthdays, and reminders about company policies. Easy stuff, or at least it was. Last Friday was my turn to send the newsletter out, so I spent the morning gathering all the necessary information and putting it together. I proofread it twice, making sure everything looked good and there were no embarrassing typos. I also made sure to double-check the recipient list, because one wrong click could send this newsletter to someone who wasn't supposed to see it. Everything seemed perfect, so I hit send. Then, I closed my email and moved on to the next task, thinking I was done for the day. Little did I know, I had just triggered an event that would spiral completely out of control. About 10 minutes later, I started getting frantic replies to my email. They weren't about the content of the newsletter at all. No, people were asking why they were receiving the email from me twice. I figured it was some sort of glitch or a mistake on the part of the email system. It's happened before, and usually it's nothing to worry about. But then, the replies started getting more and more panicked. Why did you send this to the entire company again? Are you sure this was meant for everyone? Can you please remove me from the list? I started getting confused. I checked my sent box to see if there was some sort of duplicate, but everything looked normal. That's when I noticed something horrifying in the list of recipients. In my initial attempt to hit send, I had accidentally clicked reply all. Instead of sending the newsletter to the proper distribution list, I had sent it to the entire company, along with all of the previous replies to the email I had just sent. You see, the email system in our company has this charming little feature where, when you hit reply all, it includes the entire thread. I had sent my email not only to all 300 people in the company, but also attached every prior response to the email. People had been replying to the test version of the newsletter I had sent out for internal review earlier that morning, not realizing they were hitting reply all. The email thread was now cluttered with responses like, "This is a typo. Can we make the font larger? And why are we still using Comic Sans?" This was bad. This was really bad. Now, instead of a nice, clean, company-wide update, everyone in the company had just received a personal reply from me, with all of the internal comments about the newsletter attached. It was a mix of unsolicited opinions and minor nitpicks that were never supposed to go beyond the small team working on newsletter. It was embarrassing, but it didn't end there. Oh no, people started replying to that email. They were confused. Some were angry. A few employees from different departments who had absolutely no business being involved in the newsletter process were now seeing every internal conversation and personal comment. And because the email had gone to everyone, some employees who had no idea who I was began sending me messages asking if I could remove them from the list. I felt the panic rising in my chest. At this point, I quickly hit forward to the company's IT department, hoping they might be able to undo the mess I had created. They didn't respond immediately. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started sending individual apologies to everyone who had received the email one by one. I tried to explain that it was a mistake and I was really sorry for the confusion. The situation escalated further when my boss got involved. She emailed me saying, "Please tell me what just happened." I had no idea what to say. I wanted to crawl under my desk and never come out. She seemed to be trying to stay professional, but it was clear she was upset. I replied as quickly as I could, trying to explain the error without sounding like I was making excuses. But knowing her, she wouldn't be satisfied with just an explanation. She would want to know how this happened, why it was allowed to happen, and what I was going to do to fix it. As the day went on, the emails kept piling up. The CEO even emailed me. Seriously, the CEO, asking if there was a way to fix the situation. I tried not to hyperventilate as I read the email. There was no easy fix. We were too deep into this mess. The damage was done. By the time the IT department responded, they told me they couldn't roll back the email system to its previous state. The only solution was for everyone to manually delete the emails and try to move on. So now, I wasn't just dealing with the fallout from the newsletter. I was also getting flooded with complaints from my coworkers about having to delete the email thread that was now permanently clogging their inboxes. And as if it couldn't get worse, I received an email from HR telling me to come in for a meeting the next morning. I could only assume it was about the incident, but I couldn't even imagine how that would go. Was I about to get written up for this? Would I be fired? The next morning, I walked into HR's office, where my boss was waiting. She was serious, but not hostile, which was a relief. "We just need to go over what happened yesterday," she said. "What's important is that you understand the process and take responsibility for what happened." After a very long conversation about email etiquette and the importance of attention to detail, she told me that there would be no formal punishment, but I had to undergo a training session on company communications. She also added that the CEO was aware of what happened and would be speaking to the entire company in the next weekly meeting to clear things up. I felt a little better knowing I wasn't going to be fired, but I still had a lingering sense of dread. I had basically embarrassed myself in front of the entire company, and the whole thing had become an office-wide disaster. In the end, I learned a very important lesson. Always double-check the recipients before hitting send. And maybe avoid the reply all button unless absolutely necessary. You never know who might get dragged into an accidental email catastrophe. So yeah, that's how I nearly lost my job because of an email. I'm still here, but I'll never forget that Friday. And I don't think the rest of the company will either. TIFU, by trying to impress my girlfriend with an expensive dinner and accidentally starting a fire in the restaurant. So, here's a story that I'm honestly still embarrassed about. I'm not sure what came over me, but last weekend, I really tried to go all out for my girlfriend. It was our 2-year anniversary, and I figured I'd do something special. Take her to one of those fancy, high-end restaurants that's been getting a lot of buzz lately. You know, the ones that require a reservation weeks in advance, where the smallest glass of wine is the size of your face, and everything is plated like a work of art. I thought, this is it. This is the perfect way to impress her. Big mistake. It started out with me being a bit overambitious. I wanted to make the night memorable. So I went online and did a bunch of research on the restaurant. I knew it had a Michelin star, and honestly, I don't even really understand what that means, but I figured it sounded impressive, so I thought, if I go big, she'll be impressed. I called ahead to make sure everything was perfect, and even ordered a bottle of their finest wine, which, by the way, was about as much as my rent for the month. But it's fine, right? I had the whole night planned out. What did go wrong? The day of the dinner, I was excited but also a little nervous. I picked her up, and I could tell she was already impressed just by the fact that we were going somewhere so fancy. She was looking gorgeous, and honestly, I felt pretty good about the whole thing. I even wore my best shirt. It was black, which I thought would give off some sort of I know what I'm doing vibe. I was ready to impress her, but I guess I should have kept my expectations in check. When we arrived at the restaurant, I noticed the atmosphere was seriously upscale. The floor was so polished it almost looked like a mirror, and the decor was minimalistic to the point of making me feel like I should whisper every time I spoke. The host was incredibly formal and immediately led us to our table, which was tucked away in a quiet corner, almost too private. Honestly, I was starting to feel a little out of place, but I pushed through. We sat down, and as the waiter brought out the wine, I started to feel that rush of, okay, I'm doing it, I'm really doing it. I know that sounds pathetic, but when you've been working your ass off at a job you don't like, sometimes spending way more money than you should on a meal feels like a small victory. The waiter poured the wine with all the finesse of someone who'd been doing it for decades, and I noticed a few people glancing over at our table. Maybe they were just admiring our sophisticated choice of wine, or maybe they were just wondering why this guy was dressed like he thought he was at a much cheaper restaurant. Either way, I was starting to feel like I was nailing it. Now, here's where things started to spiral. As we were enjoying the appetizers, which, by the way, were tiny and confusing to eat, I noticed that the place had an open kitchen where you could see the chefs working. They were tossing ingredients around, working with flames, and everything was moving with such precision that it honestly looked like a performance. It was kind of mesmerizing. But then, my gaze shifted to the corner of the kitchen where one of the chefs was standing by an open flame, holding what appeared to be a dish of flambéed something. Now, I'd seen flambeing in movies, and it always seemed pretty cool. I'm not sure what possessed me, but in my attempt to be the smooth, sophisticated guy who knows his way around fine dining, I decided to point out to my girlfriend, "Hey, look at that. They're flambeing that dish," I said, trying to sound casual, like I was some sort of culinary expert. "I think they use brandy for that. It's so impressive." Of course, this was me trying to sound smarter than I was, but my girlfriend smiled and nodded, pretending to be impressed. But the moment I said it, something went horribly wrong. For reasons I still can't explain, I must have subconsciously leaned forward just a little too much to make my expert point. My elbow nudged the wine glass on the edge of the table, and in slow motion, I watched as it toppled over, spilling the expensive wine all over the white tablecloth. I froze. The waiter was nowhere to be seen, and my girlfriend let out a little gasp. The wine soaked into the tablecloth, and before I could even react, a waiter arrived to quickly clean it up. Here's the part where I really messed up. As they were cleaning up the wine spill, I realized the table was now soaked, and, in a panic to cover up my mistake, I tried to help. I reached across the table to grab some napkins, but in the process, I knocked over the bread basket. The basket flipped, sending pieces of bread scattered across the floor. At this point, I could hear the sound of Chef yelling something in the kitchen, probably related to the chaos happening at our table. But that's not the worst part. No, it gets worse. As the waiter was trying to gather the bread, I saw another flambéed dish being prepared. Without thinking, I said to my girlfriend, sometimes they can get a little out of control with the flames. I've heard of fires starting from that. It's kind of dangerous, actually. I was trying to be funny, to lighten the mood after the whole wine and bread disaster. Well, that didn't land the way I hoped. My words seemed to draw attention from the staff. The chef in the open kitchen looked visibly flustered, and suddenly there was a frantic commotion. A couple of waiters ran toward the back of the restaurant. I heard a few loud bangs from the kitchen, and just as I looked up, I saw a plume of smoke rising from where they were preparing the flambé. And then, the unmistakable scent of burnt food wafted toward our table. I could see the fire flaring up in the kitchen. The entire restaurant went silent, and every head turned toward the commotion. The staff scrambled, and a few fire extinguishers were pulled out. At that moment, my girlfriend looked at me with wide eyes, and I could feel the heat rising in my face. What had I done? Had I somehow jinxed the kitchen with my dumb comment about fires? Was I the one who started the fire with my expert knowledge? A few moments later, the fire was put out. The restaurant apologized profusely, and the staff seemed visibly shaken. but I was in full panic mode. I tried to joke it off, but nothing could save me from the absolute train wreck of a night I had caused. The food was ruined, and the energy in the room was completely off. We ended up leaving early, and I paid the bill, which, of course, was still ridiculously high, but I was mortified. As for my girlfriend, she tried to be understanding, but I could tell she was disappointed. I'm pretty sure she'll never look at me the same way again. So, yeah, I guess I really did mess up. The fire in the restaurant wasn't caused by me, but I feel like it totally was. Anyway, moral of the story, don't try to impress your girlfriend with things you don't understand. And maybe don't make fire jokes in fancy restaurants. TIFU by trying to impress my crush with a cooking class and accidentally setting the kitchen on fire. So a little background first. I, 25M, have had a huge crush on this girl, Laura, 24F, for a while. We met at a mutual friend's party about 6 months ago, and I instantly hit it off with her. She's smart, funny, and down to earth, and every time we talk, I feel like I'm on cloud nine. The problem is, I've always been a bit of a disaster when it comes to impressing girls, especially when it involves anything remotely related to cooking. Anyway, Laura and I have been texting back and forth for a while, and we both discovered we enjoy trying new things. So, when I came across this cooking class for couples promotion, I thought it'd be a great way to spend some time together, learn a new skill, and, most importantly, impress her. I signed us up without thinking twice. I mean, how hard could cooking a few dishes really be? I've watched enough YouTube cooking videos to know how to boil water and maybe even chop an onion without crying. How bad could it go? Fast forward to the day of the class. I was nervous but excited. I wanted to show off a little, but I was also secretly hoping that I wouldn't mess anything up. I spent hours picking out an outfit that was casual but stylish because I thought, I want to look good, but I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard. I showed up early, hoping to impress her with my punctuality. When Laura arrived, she looked even more amazing than I remembered. I greeted her with what I hoped was a charming smile, and we made small talk while waiting for the class to start. The cooking class was being held at this quaint little culinary school, with big windows that let in tons of natural light. The kitchen was large, open, and very professional looking, with shiny stainless steel countertops, fancy ovens, and what seemed like an overwhelming amount of cooking gadgets. I was already a little intimidated. The class began, and the instructor, a very enthusiastic chef named Carla, explained the dishes we'd be making. It was some fancy 3-course meal with a ton of ingredients. I'm talking seared scallops, homemade pasta, and a decadent chocolate lava cake for dessert. Each of us was assigned to a specific station, and of course, I ended up next to Laura. The thought of cooking next to her made me even more nervous, but I pushed through. This is going to be great, I told myself. I'm going to make her think I'm a professional chef by the end of the night. The first dish we were supposed to make was the seared scallops. Simple enough, right? You just sear them in a hot pan and add some seasoning. I thought I could handle this, especially since I'd seen it done on TV 100 times. What I didn't account for, though, was how quickly the oil in the pan would heat up. I also didn't realize how easy it was to burn the scallops if you didn't pay attention for a single second. Well, I got distracted, probably by Laura's contagious laughter or the fact that I was sweating like I was about to run a marathon. I tossed the scallops into the pan, turned around for half a second to grab some salt, and before I knew it, smoke was billowing out of the pan. I quickly tried to salvage the situation by moving the pan off the burner, but it was too late. The oil had already started to burn, and the smell was so bad that it almost made me gag. Laura looked at me with wide eyes. "Is that supposed to happen?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and amusement. I did my best to play it cool, even though inside I was panicking. Yeah, just a little, extra crispy flavor," I stammered, not sure if she'd buy it. I grabbed a spatula and tried to scoop the now charred scallops out of the pan, but the blackened bits stuck to the metal like they had fused into one indestructible mass. I could feel the heat of embarrassment creeping up my neck. Carla, the instructor, had clearly noticed the smoke and came rushing over. "What happened here?" she asked in a tone that was both professional and concerned. I sheepishly explained that I'd maybe left the pan on a bit too long. She gave me a quick lesson on the proper way to sear scallops and suggested we move on to the next station before I managed to set the entire kitchen on fire. I tried to act casual, but my face was probably the color of a tomato by this point. To make matters worse, Laura was being way too nice about the whole thing. "It's okay," she said, smiling in that way that made me melt. "I'm sure the next one will be better." Well, spoiler alert, it wasn't. The next dish we were supposed to tackle was the homemade pasta. It was supposed to be a fun and hands-on process, rolling out the dough, cutting it into shapes, and then cooking it. Simple, right? Wrong. My pasta dough was the consistency of concrete, and no matter how hard I tried to knead it, it just wouldn't come together. I was pushing and pulling at it, making the most unattractive mess I've ever seen in a kitchen, while Laura expertly made her dough with minimal effort. At this point, I was trying to salvage any shred of dignity. I turned to Laura and said, "So, I'm not really a pasta-making pro, but hey, at least I'm trying." She chuckled, and I couldn't help but laugh at myself too. Finally, we reached the dessert portion, the chocolate lava cakes. I was determined to redeem myself. I thought, this is it. If I mess this up, I'm never living this down. We followed the instructions, and I was careful about mixing the ingredients this time. Everything seemed to be going well until it was time to pop the cakes into the oven. I placed my lava cakes in the oven and set the timer, feeling pretty proud of myself. As they baked, I casually turned to Laura to make small talk, but suddenly I noticed a strange sound coming from the oven. It was faint at first, like a gentle sizzling, but then it got louder. I opened the oven to check, and to my horror, one of the cakes had oozed over the edge of the ramekin and was now dripping molten chocolate directly onto the oven floor. I think it's burning," I said, wide-eyed, as I frantically grabbed the oven mitts to pull the cakes out. It wasn't just burning. It was a full-on chocolate apocalypse happening right before my eyes. The whole kitchen now smelled like something was on fire. Carla rushed over again, and this time, I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. "This is definitely not how it's supposed to look," she said, trying to keep it professional. But even she was cracking a smile at how much of a disaster I had become. In the end, the night wasn't a complete loss. Laura was genuinely sweet about everything and didn't judge me for turning the cooking class into a comedy of errors. We managed to salvage a few bits and pieces of the dishes, but most of it was inedible. We ended up leaving the class early and grabbing some pizza, which, at this point, seemed like a safer bet. As for my crush on Laura, well, she told me she had a great time, and I think we both realized that sometimes the best memories are made when things go horribly wrong. And despite everything, she still agreed to go on another date with me. Maybe I'll try to impress her with something simpler next time, like a nice dinner at a restaurant, or, better yet, we'll just order takeout. At least the kitchen didn't burn down. TIFU by accidentally breaking my friend's relationship, and then having to act like I was totally fine with it. So, this happened a few months ago, and I still can't wrap my head around how everything spiraled out of control. I've been debating whether to share this, but I need to get it off my chest. If I hadn't seen it play out in front of me, I wouldn't believe it either. To start, I'm usually that friend who tries to keep things chill and low-key. I'm not the type to get involved in drama, and I'm definitely not someone who would ever intentionally cause any problems between friends. But apparently, my good intentions were no match for an innocent mistake that ended up ruining everything. Let me give you a bit of background first. I have this close friend. Let's call her Sarah. We've known each other for about 5 years. We met in college and instantly clicked because we were both kind of introverted, loved the same books, and spent most of our time in coffee shops discussing anything from philosophy to random Netflix shows. About a year ago, Sarah started dating Jake, a guy she met at work. He seemed like a nice enough dude, very quiet, kind of awkward, but in a way that was endearing. Honestly, they seemed like the perfect couple, and they were really happy together. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I didn't know Jake super well. We'd hung out a few times, but he always seemed a bit off. It wasn't anything obvious. He just had this air of unease about him, like he was uncomfortable in his own skin. But since Sarah seemed so happy with him, I brushed it off. They'd been together for about 6 months when this whole mess started. One Friday evening, Sarah invited me over for a dinner party she was hosting at her apartment. She had cooked this amazing meal, and there were a few other friends there, including Jake. I had a long week at work and was looking forward to unwinding with some good food and conversation. Everything was going well until the moment I decided to bring up an innocent topic that would later come to haunt me. At some point during dinner, I made a casual comment about how Sarah and Jake always seemed so in sync. I was genuinely trying to be supportive and nice, just giving them a little compliment. You know, the kind of thing you say when you see your friends in a happy relationship and want to let them know you're rooting for them. But apparently, my comment hit a nerve. Sarah smiled awkwardly, but Jake froze. His face immediately turned pale, and he went completely silent. It was one of those uncomfortable silences where everyone at the table can sense something's wrong, but no one knows exactly what to say. I was immediately confused, but I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just shy or didn't like being the center of attention. No big deal, right? Wrong. After dinner, Sarah and Jake left the table to clean up, and I stayed behind chatting with the other guests. I didn't think anything of it until about 10 minutes later when Sarah came back into the room, looking visibly upset. She excused herself to the bathroom, and I noticed Jake was sitting there, staring into space, looking like someone had just told him his dog ran away. It was bizarre. When Sarah came out of the bathroom, she pulled me aside in the hallway and asked if I could come outside for a minute. She looked like she was about to cry, so naturally, I followed her. "Listen," she said, voice shaky. "I need to ask you something. Did you say something weird to Jake earlier?" I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" "Well, Jake he kind of shut down after you said that. And now he's saying that you were making fun of him and that you don't like him. He's really upset." I was floored. I never in a million years would have guessed that something so innocent could have triggered that kind of reaction. "I didn't mean to upset him," I said, trying to explain. "I literally just said you two seem happy together. I was just being nice." But Sarah was already shaking her head. "No, I know that's not what you meant. But Jake doesn't see it that way. He thinks you were calling him too quiet or too awkward, and now he's questioning everything. He's convinced that you don't like him, and that we're just pretending everything's fine." I was speechless. I tried to defend myself, but Sarah was already looking more and more distressed, and I could see she was torn between comforting her boyfriend and being mad at me for causing tension between them. Eventually, she decided to go talk to Jake privately, and I was left sitting there like an idiot, wondering what the hell just happened. The next few days were a whirlwind of texts and awkward conversations. I apologized profusely to Sarah, but she was clearly torn. Jake wasn't responding to her either, and she couldn't figure out if he was just being overly sensitive or if he genuinely didn't want to be with her anymore. It turned into this giant, uncomfortable mess that I felt completely responsible for, even though all I'd done was give a well-meaning compliment. Sarah ended up texting me the next morning, saying that she and Jake needed to have a serious talk. She was going to give him some space and figure out whether they should continue their relationship. I was floored. How had a simple remark about their relationship blossomed into this drama? It wasn't supposed to be like this. Over the next few weeks, Sarah kept me updated on the status of their relationship. Every time I thought they might be getting back to normal, something else would happen, and Jake would spiral further into self-doubt. He began accusing Sarah of not supporting him enough, of making him feel inferior around me, and of being too focused on her friendship with me. He was even going so far as to say he felt like he was in competition with me. It was bizarre and heartbreaking to watch. Ultimately, after about a month of back and forth, Sarah decided to break up with Jake. She told me she just couldn't be with someone who wasn't able to communicate openly and who took every little thing so personally. While I understood her decision, I couldn't shake the guilt. I was the catalyst for this whole thing, and now she was single and heartbroken because of my accidental comment. To this day, Sarah and I have talked a little bit about the breakup, but we've both agreed it's better not to dwell on how everything went down. We still hang out and get together occasionally, but there's always this underlying awkwardness now that I'm the reason she's no longer with Jake. Sometimes I wonder if she resents me for it. I never meant for any of this to happen, and I don't even know how I can make it right. But I guess the lesson here is this: be careful what you say, even if it seems harmless. What feels like a compliment to you might trigger something totally unexpected in someone else. Now, I'm just trying to move forward without making the same mistake again. TLDR, I gave a compliment about my friend's relationship that unintentionally triggered her boyfriend's insecurities. It led to them breaking up, and now I feel guilty as hell. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by accidentally sending my boss a very inappropriate message. So, I made a colossal mistake today. A mistake that will haunt me for the rest of my professional career, and I'm praying no one ever finds out about it. Except, of course, the internet. Here we go. It all started when I was at work, minding my own business. I'm in my late 20s, working in a relatively small office as a project manager for a marketing company. My boss, let's call him Brad, is this super professional guy who's been in the industry for years and is one of those people who has a magnetic, almost intimidating presence. He's smart, charming, and doesn't let his personal life slip into the office. We've had a few casual conversations, but nothing too personal. I've always been careful to keep everything professional with him. So back to today. It was a regular Wednesday morning, and I had just finished my cup of coffee and was settling into my emails. I was trying to juggle a few tasks at once, including responding to an urgent email from my friend Tina, who works in a different department. Now, Tina and I have a very informal, close friendship. We've been friends for years, and we text each other about everything. Work stuff, personal stuff, random memes, you name it. I had been chatting with her about a presentation I was preparing for a big client meeting tomorrow, and I had asked her for some help with one of the slides. Tina responded immediately, as usual, and the conversation quickly devolved into something entirely inappropriate, like the kind of thing that would make you want to delete every text thread the moment you see it. We were making jokes about one of the client's CEO, who is a known mess in the office, basically the workplace equivalent of a frat bro in a suit. She had sent me a meme about how the CEO had probably gotten drunk at last week's company party and then tried to hit on every female employee in the room. I laughed at her message and sent a reply that was probably too much in jest. I'm going to try to paraphrase as best as I can, but essentially, I replied with something along the lines of, LOL, imagine if he tried hitting on me. I'd totally shut him down with a quick, I'm just here for the free drinks, and walk away before he could say anything dumb. Now, that's not the worst part. The worst part is that I accidentally sent that message not to Tina, but to my boss, Brad. I still don't even know how it happened. I was so used to texting Tina, I didn't even double-check the recipient. You know how sometimes you have a lot of open chats on your phone, and your thumb just taps the wrong one? That's exactly what happened. I thought I was replying Tina, but I accidentally hit Brad's name. And, of course, Brad was the last person I had messaged on Slack earlier that morning about the client meeting. So there it was. I stared at my phone for what felt like an eternity, watching my message appear in the little chat bubble on Brad's screen. I went completely numb. My heart started racing as my mind tried to process what had just happened. There was no going back. The message had already been sent. I started typing a response to Brad, trying to cover up my mistake. I couldn't even think of anything coherent. I was so panicked that I just typed, sorry, wrong message. Meant to send that to a friend. Ignore this. My bad. But then my brain clicked into overdrive and I thought, wait, what if he's already read it? What if he's just sitting there, judging me for being unprofessional? I started frantically brainstorming how to save myself from this disaster. There was no graceful way out. I had just made myself look like an idiot, and I couldn't think of any excuse that would make sense. To make things worse, Brad responded almost immediately. I braced myself. My phone buzzed. Got it. Don't worry about it. That was it. No judgment, no angry response, just got it. But for some reason, that only made it worse. The lack of any kind of reaction felt even more ominous. Was he disappointed in me? Did he think I was a complete mess? What was going on in his head? I felt like my entire career was over in that one moment. I debated whether I should send another message, apologizing even more profusely or explaining myself, but I realized that would probably make things worse. So I just left it alone, hoping the whole thing would blow over. I tried to distract myself with work, but every time I glanced at my phone, I kept imagining Brad rereading my message and slowly shaking his head in disappointment. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was what had just happened. Did Brad find me completely unprofessional now? Was I getting marked down on some mental performance evaluation in his mind? Then, around 4:30 p.m., my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Brad. I froze. I opened it, prepared for whatever disaster was about to unfold. It read, "Hey, no worries. By the way, when you're done with that presentation, you should totally come to my office and grab a drink. I'll be working late, and I've got a bottle of whiskey I've been meaning to open. Could be a good stress reliever after the client meeting tomorrow." I stared at that message for a while, rereading it to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Brad was inviting me to drink with him, and this was coming from the same guy who always seemed so buttoned up and serious about everything at work. Was this some kind of joke? Or was he trying to make a point about how informal we were being? I didn't know what to say. I felt like I had just opened Pandora's box. So I did what any self-respecting, terrified employee would do. I didn't reply. The next morning, I showed up to work early, heart still pounding in my chest, and tried to pretend like everything was normal. Brad didn't say anything about it. He didn't bring up the whiskey invite or the awkward text. It was like nothing had happened. Now, I'm still left wondering, did he read that message and just not care? Was he trying to make me feel better? Or am I just so far down that I messed up rabbit hole that I can't even comprehend what's going on anymore? Either way, I'm not sure I can ever look at my boss the same way again, and I'm definitely triple-checking my recipient from now on. If anyone has advice on how to recover from something like this, I'd love to hear it. Because at this point, I'm just trying to get through today without completely embarrassing myself. Moral of the story? Always double-check your recipient, especially if you're about to send something borderline inappropriate. Because when you don't, your boss might just end up being the one who gets the memo instead of your friend. TIFU by accidentally sending a video of myself to my boss instead of my girlfriend. So, I have to start this off by saying I never thought I'd be in this position. I've read stories like this before and thought, man, that sucks for them, but never in a million years did I think this would happen to me. It all started on a Monday morning, a typical day of work for me. I'm a 32-year-old guy, working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company. I've been with my boss, Sarah, for over a year, and while we get along well, she's the type of person who doesn't have much patience for mistakes. I've always been the type to avoid making those. Now, I should preface this by saying I have a pretty active relationship with my girlfriend, Jess. We've been dating for about 8 months now, and we're both pretty into texting each other, especially in the mornings when we're both getting ready for work. We like to share little things about our day ahead, send memes, and, just do that whole cute couple thing. I'm not ashamed of it. So, Monday morning, I wake up to an alarm that's much too loud for my liking, but hey, that's what coffee is for. I start getting ready for work, and as usual, Jess and I are texting back and forth. Nothing too crazy. I send her some corny joke I saw on Twitter, and she responds with a laughing emoji. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then, as I'm getting ready to leave the house, she sends me a message that's a little more personal. It was a sexy message, one of those good morning texts that are more on the risque side. I smile to myself, but I'm also half distracted because I'm running late. So, as I'm driving to work, I start thinking about how I want to respond. I have a little bit of a playful streak in me, so I decide to send her a video. Nothing crazy, but I record a short video with a goofy grin on my face, where I'm basically just saying, "Good morning, baby. I'm thinking about you. Hope you have a good day. Can't wait to see you tonight." It's a little flirtatious, but nothing inappropriate. The kind of thing you'd send to your girlfriend to keep the spark alive. Now, here's where things start to go terribly wrong. I finish my drive, park, and walk into the office. I get settled in my desk, and I'm trying to start my day. But of course my phone dings. Jess had replied, and I get a few more flirty messages from her. I'm feeling good about it, so I decide to send her a response. But as I'm reaching for my phone, I get an email from my boss, Sarah, who's asking me for a status update on the project we're working on. I've been working on this marketing presentation for the last couple of weeks, and it's supposed to be ready for a meeting that's happening later today. I've been under some pressure, so I quickly type out a brief response to Sarah's email and send it over. But here's where my brain completely shuts down. I think I'm still in my text messages with Jess. In reality, I'm in the email app. I open the wrong thread, and without even looking, I hit the button to send a video. The video that I meant to send to Jess. The one where I'm all smiley and saying, "Good morning, baby. I'm thinking about you." You know, the one that's basically just a video of me looking like an idiot. The worst part? I didn't even realize what I'd done. I wasn't paying attention. I was in a rush, my head was all over the place, and I just sent it. A few seconds later, I get a notification. Sarah's email replied. My stomach drops to the floor. I check it, and all I see is, what's this, with the video attached. For a moment, I freeze. I don't even know how to react. My mind is just screaming, no, 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 and no. This cannot be happening. I open the video, and sure enough, there I am, grinning like an idiot and saying, "Good morning, baby. I'm thinking about you. Hope you have a good day. Can't wait to see you tonight." I've had a few awkward moments with Sarah before, but nothing like this. I immediately start sweating and thinking of a way to fix this. I can't just ignore it. This is going to be the thing she remembers about me forever. I've been at this job for a year, and now I've just sent my boss an unsolicited, completely ridiculous video of myself being overly affectionate. It's beyond embarrassing. I decide to try to do damage control. I quickly reply to her email saying, "Oh my God, I am so sorry. That was meant for my girlfriend. That video was completely unintended for you." I meant to send her a silly good morning message, and my brain wasn't fully functioning yet this morning. I try to sound casual about it, but I know she's not going to take it well. I wait for what feels like hours for her reply, but it only takes a few minutes. I open the email, heart pounding, and she says, "No problem. We all make mistakes." But there's something about her response that makes me feel like she's just being nice. I can't tell if she's genuinely not that bothered by it, or if she's trying to cover up how weird it must have been for her. Either way, it doesn't feel reassuring. The rest of the day is a blur. I keep getting these little notifications from Sarah about work, but I can't focus on any of it. All I can think about is that damn video. I know she's probably going to tell the rest of the office about it. I've just become the office weirdo in her eyes. At lunch, I text Jess to explain what happened. She's, of course, laughing her ass off, but I'm mortified. "You really sent that to your boss?" she texts. What did she say? I try to play it off, but in reality, I'm just hoping that by some miracle, everyone forgets about it. In the end, it didn't blow up as badly as I thought it would. Sarah hasn't mentioned it again, and I haven't been fired, so I guess that's something. But now, every time I see her, I can't help but wonder if she's silently judging me. The video has become a permanent part of my office culture, whether I like it or not. So yeah, TIFU by accidentally sending a video of myself looking like a fool to my boss instead of my girlfriend. It's been a rough week. TIFU by accidentally sending a heartfelt love letter to my coworker instead of my girlfriend. This is one of those moments where I still can't believe I did what I did. I've had my share of embarrassing moments, but nothing compares to the pure disaster I caused by a simple mistake, one that left me questioning my own sanity and social standing at work. It all started a couple of weeks ago when my girlfriend and I were having some issues. We've been together for almost 2 years, and like every couple, we've had our ups and downs. Lately, though, things felt more like a roller coaster than a smooth ride. There were misunderstandings, small arguments, and we both seemed to be under a lot of stress from our jobs and other life obligations. One night, after a particularly heated argument, I found myself sitting on the couch, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, when I had the idea of writing her a letter. Now, I'm not the most romantic guy out there. I'm more of a fix the problem and move on type, but I knew that this time I needed to do something special. I thought a handwritten letter would be a good way to express how much I care and to apologize for not always being as thoughtful as I should be. I wanted it to be personal, sincere, and most of all, meaningful. So, I poured my heart into it. I told her how much she meant to me, how I appreciated everything she did for us, and how sorry I was for being distant. I even added a bit about how we could work things out and that I wanted to make it right. I spent hours on that letter. I wanted it to be perfect. When I was finally happy with it, I decided to send it the next morning. But, as anyone who's ever had a moment of clarity in the middle of the night knows, I had a minor panic attack about whether or not it would be enough. I thought I should make sure it was perfect before sending it off. So, instead of printing it out, I typed the letter up on my computer, thinking I'd review it and make any final changes. The problem started the next morning. My boss is a pretty chill guy, and we've gotten along well over the years. He's one of those bosses who doesn't micromanage and gives his employees a lot of freedom. We become friendly over the course of working together, even hanging out outside of work sometimes. Recently, he had asked me to help him out with a personal project of his. It was a small, relatively easy task, but he wanted my help to get it done quickly. I agreed to help, figuring it would give me a nice break from the usual office grind. So, I opened my email that morning to send the letter to my girlfriend who had already left for work, and I found an email from my boss. The project was nearing completion, and he wanted me to send a few files he'd been working on. I thought, no problem. I'll take care of this and then get back to my personal stuff. I went to my email draft, where I had copied and pasted the letter to my girlfriend. I opened the email and took a look at it one more time. I quickly made a few edits, feeling satisfied with the tone and message. I wasn't fully awake yet, and the next thing I know, I clicked the wrong email address in my contacts. Instead of selecting my girlfriend's email address, I accidentally selected my boss's email address. Now, I don't know if it was the early hour, the lack of caffeine, or just the fact that I'd been dealing with so much stress that I didn't notice the email address, but I clicked send without a second thought. I realized what I had done only about 10 seconds after hitting send. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck, and a chill ran through my body. I opened my sent folder, and there was my heartfelt, emotional letter to my girlfriend in my boss's inbox. I panicked. I froze. I don't even know what I was thinking in that moment, but my heart was racing and my mind was screaming, "What the hell have you done?" For a second, I thought about pretending I had meant to send it to him as some sort of joke, but then I quickly realized how absurd that would be. What would I even say? "Hey, boss, sorry for the love letter. Just thought I'd share my deep feelings with you." That would be a career ender. I opened the email again, hoping there was some miracle, some undo button that would reverse everything. But of course there was nothing. I sat there for a minute, completely paralyzed by embarrassment and panic. What was worse was that my boss is the type of guy who always reads his emails immediately. If he hadn't seen it by the time I saw my mistake, I figured I might have a small chance to stop it. But the odds weren't in my favor. My hands were shaking as I quickly tried to compose myself and figure out what to do next. I ended up doing the only thing I could think of, sending him another email. It was short and straight to the point. "Hey, I'm really sorry about the email I just sent. That was meant for someone else. Please disregard it. I'll follow up with the files you requested shortly." I sat there, staring at my inbox, waiting for a response. The next few hours felt like an eternity. I checked my phone every few minutes, hoping for some sign that he had gotten the email and either ignored it or laughed it off. But nothing came. About an hour later, I heard from my boss. His response was simple: "No worries. I figure it was meant for someone else. Hope things are going well on your end. Let me know when you have the files ready." Relieved that he wasn't going to fire me or even comment on the absurdity of the situation, I quickly responded and pretended like nothing had happened. But deep down, I couldn't help but feel like an absolute idiot. The real kicker came later that evening when I went to my girlfriend's place and handed her the letter I had written earlier. She looked at me, a little confused, and then said, "Why do you send me that weird email earlier? It had all this stuff about us, but it wasn't really what I was expecting. Was that your idea of a joke?" I had completely forgotten that she would have seen the email I sent to my boss. So, now, not only did I have to apologize to my boss for sending him a love letter, but I also had to explain to my girlfriend why I had accidentally sent her my boss's email. TLDR, accidentally sent a love letter meant for my girlfriend to my boss, panicked, sent an apology to my boss, and then had to explain it all to my girlfriend. TIFU by accidentally becoming the most awkward guest at a wedding. So, this happened a few months ago, and I'm still not sure how to process it. I was invited to a wedding by a friend from college. Let's call him Mark. We weren't super close, but we kept in touch over the years, and I always thought of him as a nice guy. He and his fiancée, Lucy, were getting married in a small, rustic venue a couple of hours outside the city. It was one of those weddings where you could tell everyone knew each other, so I was excited but also nervous because I didn't know many people there, and I didn't want to be that awkward dude hanging out at the edge of the party. I should mention that I'm not great in social settings. I've gotten better over the years, but I still have this tendency to be overly polite and sometimes come off as stiff or weird without meaning to. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I was trying to figure out how to blend in, dress appropriately, and just generally not embarrass myself. I don't know what I was expecting, but I definitely didn't anticipate what actually happened. The day of the wedding arrived, and I was feeling pretty good about it. I'd chosen a nice navy blue suit. Nothing too flashy, but still respectable. I arrived at the venue, parked in the designated lot, and joined a group of other guests walking towards the entrance. Everything seemed pretty normal at first, but when I walked into the venue, the first thing I noticed was the music. It was loud, really loud, and kind of offbeat. There was a violin playing some strange rendition of Canon in D, but it sounded like someone was trying to play it after a few too many drinks. I wasn't sure if that was a part of the charm or if it was just a mistake, but I brushed it off and tried to focus on finding Mark or someone I knew. I scanned the crowd and finally spotted him. He was standing by the bar, laughing with a group of people, and he immediately waved me over. I made my way over, feeling relieved to see a familiar face. We exchanged pleasantries, and he introduced me to a few of his friends. So far, so good, right? The ceremony started shortly after that, and we all made our way to the seats. The bride, Lucy, was beautiful, of course, and Mark looked genuinely happy. The ceremony was nice, but I couldn't help but notice a few odd things. For one, the officiant, a local pastor or something, seemed to be reading from a piece of paper he could barely hold straight. I'm not sure if he was nervous or just unprepared, but there were some really long pauses between sentences, and at one point he even dropped a script and had to scramble to pick it up. I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be funny or if everyone was just pretending it wasn't happening, but I couldn't stop thinking about how awkward it was. Then came the vows. Mark and Lucy had written their own vows, which is always a sweet touch, but it was hard not to notice that Lucy seemed to be struggling with hers. She was saying beautiful things about their relationship, but she kept pausing to clear her throat and fidget with the paper. At one point, she even started tearing up, which of course made everyone start tearing up too. But then she made a joke to try to lighten the mood. I just can't believe I'm getting married to Mark, the guy who still can't figure out how to fold a fitted sheet. It was a cute, relatable joke, and everyone laughed. But then, for reasons I still don't understand, I decided to chime in. Maybe I thought it was a bonding moment, or maybe I was trying to show I was with it. Either way, I turned to the guy sitting next to me, who I had just met, and said, "Oh yeah, that's so true. Fitted sheets are impossible to fold. I have a pile of them in my closet that I just stuff into the back corner and pray no one notices." It wasn't the worst thing to say, right? But then there was this moment of silence that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The guy next to me didn't even respond. I looked around the room, and it dawned on me that everyone was staring at me. The entire room was silent, and I realized I had just interrupted one of the most emotional moments of the ceremony with a random comment about fitted sheets. I felt my face flush, and I swear I could feel the heat radiating from it. I tried to backpedal, laughing nervously and saying something like, "But seriously though, who knows how to fold them, right?" No one laughed. In fact, the only sound was the faint, awkward shuffle of feet as people tried to shift in their seats without drawing attention to how uncomfortable they were. The ceremony continued, and I felt like I was melting into the seat. The rest of the vows went smoothly, and I kept my head down, hoping no one would remember my incredibly stupid comment. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. After the ceremony, we moved into the reception area, which was beautifully decorated. The whole vibe was charming, rustic with candles on every table and fairy lights hanging from the ceiling. Mark and Lucy were doing their rounds, thanking everyone for coming, and I tried to make myself scarce so I didn't embarrass myself further. But as fate would have it, I ended up standing near the buffet table, just minding my business when the conversation turned to, guess what, fitted sheets. Someone at the table had apparently heard my comment during the ceremony and had brought it up again, and suddenly I was the guy who couldn't fold a fitted sheet. "Hey, we need to get you some lessons," someone laughed, and before I knew it, a full-on debate about how to fold fitted sheets had broken out. Mark's dad, who I'd never met before, chimed in with, "Oh, don't even get me started. I have a system, but no one ever follows it. I try to laugh it off, but I could tell it wasn't working. The conversation was no longer about the wedding or even about Mark and Lucy. It was about me and my unfortunate inability to fold a fitted sheet like a normal person. As I stood there, trying to figure out how to leave without being noticed, Mark's mom came up to me with a huge smile and asked, "So, I hear you're the expert on fitted sheets?" I wanted to die. By the time dinner was served, I had basically become a walking punchline. Every conversation somehow circled back to me, and I could feel the eyes of every guest on me whenever I spoke. I kept telling myself to just enjoy the food and drink and wait for the dance floor to open up. The dancing, at least, was a safe space, except when the DJ decided to play a remix version of Canon in D during the first dance. Yes, that same weird version I'd heard earlier in the ceremony. When the night finally ended, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I thanked Mark and Lucy, apologized for being such a weird guest, which in hindsight may have only made it worse, and bolted. I don't know if they were even aware of how awkward I had made things, but I've avoided looking at their wedding photos on social media ever since. So yeah, TIFU by turning myself into the most awkward person at a wedding by making a random, unnecessary comment about fitted sheets and then becoming the subject of everyone's attention for the rest of the night. TIFU by accidentally sending my ex an intimate photo meant for my new girlfriend. So, about a week ago, I made one of the most embarrassing and potentially relationship-destroying mistakes of my life. It all started on a lazy Sunday afternoon when I decided to catch up with some of my friends over text. I had just gotten into a new relationship a couple of months ago, and everything was going pretty well. My new girlfriend, Sarah, and I were really hitting it off. Things were intimate, fun, and generally feeling like everything was in a good place. We were still in the phase of sending cute, sexy, flirty texts, which is honestly my favorite part of a new relationship. But, as with most things in my life, things didn't stay calm for long. To give a little backstory, I have an ex, and though we've been broken up for a while, she and I had an arrangement where we stayed somewhat friendly. I wouldn't say we were best friends, but we checked in occasionally and had the kind of relationship where we could talk without it being awkward. I thought it was important to stay civil, especially since we shared some mutual friends and were both active in the same social circles. It was one of those lazy days where I was just lounging around in my apartment, scrolling through my phone and texting. I was chatting with Sarah, and we were sending some pretty racy messages. I don't want to get into the specifics, but let's just say that things were heating up in the text conversation. At this point, I figured it was a good idea to send Sarah a photo to match the mood. Nothing too crazy, but something that would make her smile and keep the excitement going. Now, here's where I screwed up. I had just sent Sarah a pic, which, for context, was very much intended for her eyes only. I got a little distracted, and while I was texting Sarah, my phone buzzed with a message from my ex. Since it wasn't uncommon for her to reach out now and then, I quickly swiped to see what she had to say. I should have double-checked who I was texting, but I didn't. I was tired, distracted, and my brain wasn't working on all cylinders. I was still thinking about my conversation with Sarah, but instead of opening my ex's message and replying like a normal person, I decided to send her a quick, "Hey, how's it going?" text. I then, without thinking, attached the exact same photo I had just sent to Sarah and pressed send. I realized my mistake almost immediately. I could feel my stomach drop as the sent notification appeared on my screen. I froze. My mind raced, and I quickly opened my messages with Sarah to see if I had messed up. I could see that Sarah had already replied to my most recent message, so I knew I had sent it to the wrong person. My stomach churned with panic, but it didn't stop there. I stared at the message thread with my ex. Her name was at the top of the conversation. And then there it was. The photo. The intimate, private, and very personal photo that was meant for Sarah only, right there in the message thread with my ex. At this point, I was almost in a state of shock. What could I do? Should I try to explain? Should I just let it go and hope she wouldn't notice? But it was too late. My ex had already opened the message, and her reply came through instantly. Why the F***CK did you just send me that? I was sweating bullets. I had no idea how to respond. I tried to backtrack, quickly typing something like, "Oh my God, sorry. That was meant for someone else." But in my panic, my hands were shaking, and I was typing like a madman. I'm sure the response made even less sense than the original message. It just wasn't going to make sense no matter what I said. My ex didn't respond right away, and for a few moments, I just stared at the screen in horror, unsure of what to do next. I took a deep breath and tried to clear my mind. There was no way around it. I had to own up to it. I swallowed my pride and wrote out a more coherent message. Look, I'm really sorry. That was a private message I meant to send to someone else. Please don't take it the wrong way. But then, just as I was preparing for the worst, my ex replied with a simple LOL. Okay, whatever. It wasn't the response I was expecting, and honestly, I was still reeling from the fact that I just sent her an intimate photo meant for someone else. I had no idea how she would react, but I assumed she would at least be confused or a little offended. Instead, she seemed almost amused, which in some ways made it worse. At this point, I had to also get back to Sarah. I couldn't let this go without addressing it. I quickly sent her a message. Okay, I have to confess. I made a huge mistake, and I accidentally sent my ex the photo I meant for you. I swear it was an accident. I was just texting her and didn't realize I sent the wrong message to the wrong person. I honestly thought Sarah might be mad or think it was weird, but thankfully, she was understanding. She laughed it off and reassured me that it wasn't a big deal, but I could tell she was a little confused about how I could mess that up. At this point, I was still feeling a mixture of embarrassment and relief. I had managed to avoid any major fallout, but the situation had turned my world upside down for a few hours. I think I was mostly just lucky that my ex found the whole thing amusing instead of offensive or intrusive. But I definitely learned a valuable lesson from the whole ordeal. Always double-check who you're texting and be careful with your photos. The next time I sent Sarah a photo, I was ridiculously cautious, triple-checking every message and every recipient before pressing send. And as for my ex, well, we've still stayed friendly, but I'll be sure to be way more careful next time I send a text or a photo her way. Lesson learned. Never assume you're too smart to make a mistake. TIFU by accidentally starting a small fire in my apartment building while trying to impress my new neighbor. So, I got to start off by saying that I've always been one of those people who try to do a little too much when meeting someone new. I'm not exactly the most confident person, but I tend to think that if I show off a little, people will like me. And, well, it turns out that sometimes trying to impress others can really backfire. I learned that the hard way yesterday. I moved into my new apartment about a month ago, and while the building is nice, it's a bit older and has this slightly strange vibe to it. It's one of those old brick buildings with creaky floors and exposed pipes, but it's got character. Plus, the rent's pretty affordable, so I'm not complaining. I didn't really know anyone in the building, but I saw a few people here and there. None of them seemed too interesting, though, until I met my new neighbor. Her name is Emily. She's in her mid-20s, works in marketing, and always seems to have a smile on her face. You know, the kind of person who just exudes warmth without even trying. We'd exchanged a couple of polite hellos in the hallway, but nothing beyond that. That was until last week when I had the bright idea to invite her over for coffee. I mean, I don't know why I thought it would be a great idea, but something about her just made me want to get to know her better. The only problem was that I didn't exactly have a coffee maker. I know. How can you call yourself an adult and not have a coffee maker? But I wasn't going to let that stop me from impressing her. So, I did what any reasonable person would do when trying to make a good impression. I decided to brew coffee the old-fashioned way, over an open flame. I've watched a ton of cooking videos online, and I remembered seeing a cool technique where you use a metal pour-over cone on top of a pot to brew coffee directly over a stovetop flame. Sure, I didn't have the proper equipment, but I figured I could just improvise. I had a regular saucepan, a metal strainer, and a good bag of ground coffee. How hard could it be? So, I texted Emily to invite her over. She seemed excited, and we agreed on a time. I figured it would be a good chance to get to know each other better, and maybe, just maybe, I could show off my barista skills. She arrived at my door, looking cute in her jeans and hoodie. We exchanged some small talk, and then I led her into the kitchen to wow her with my coffee-making abilities. I set everything up, making sure I had the coffee grounds just right, the water heating on the stove, and the makeshift pour-over contraption placed neatly above the saucepan. Emily was watching me with this sweet, encouraging smile, and I could feel my nerves creeping up. I wanted everything to go perfectly. As I started pouring the hot water over the coffee grounds, I noticed a small puff of steam coming from the metal strainer. It didn't seem like anything to be concerned about, so I kept pouring, trying to act like I had done this a million times before. That's when things started going south. I guess the metal strainer was getting hotter than I realized because it suddenly started to smoke. At first, it was just a little wisp of smoke, so I thought it was normal. I kept pouring the water, but the smoke quickly turned into a noticeable cloud. Emily looked at it and asked if I was sure this was supposed to happen. I tried to laugh it off, but my heart was racing. The next thing I knew, I heard a small pop. It was so subtle, I almost didn't catch it. But before I could react, the strainer erupted into flames. Flames! They were dancing around the edges of the strainer, licking the sides of the pot. I froze. Emily froze. We just stared at the fire for a solid second, neither of us saying anything. I quickly grabbed the nearest towel and tried to smother the flames, but it only made things worse. The towel caught fire, and I dropped it on the floor, which was now also smoking. At this point, I realized that I had officially messed up. The fire wasn't just in the pot anymore. It was spreading. Panicked, I grabbed the saucepan and tried to throw it in the sink. The flames jumped higher, and I knew I had to do something more drastic. I rushed to the fire extinguisher under the sink, but of course it was one of those things you never think to check until you need it. The damn thing was expired. Now, the kitchen was filled with smoke, and I could hear the faint smell of something burning. Emily, bless her heart, was just standing there, wide-eyed, looking at the chaos unfolding around us. She finally snapped out of it and grabbed her phone to call 911. As I frantically waved a dish towel in front of the fire to try to put it out, I could hear the sound of sirens in the distance. The fire was still going strong, and now the kitchen smelled like a mix of burnt coffee, plastic, and regret. The fire department arrived within minutes, which was a relief, but I still couldn't believe I had managed to cause this much destruction in such a short time. The firemen quickly got the situation under control, and thankfully, no one was hurt. They checked over everything, including the old stovetop, and assured me that the fire was contained to the coffee-making disaster zone. But that didn't stop me from feeling completely embarrassed. The firemen seemed pretty understanding, though, and they even joked that they'd never seen anyone try to brew coffee like that before. One of them asked if I was planning to start a new trend. By the time everything was cleared up and I was standing in my smoke-filled apartment, Emily was still there, looking a bit stunned but oddly calm. I didn't know what to say, so I just apologized over and over. She told me it was okay, that it was just an accident, but I could tell she was trying to hold back laughter. I could hear the sound of my neighbors starting to gather outside my door, probably wondering what the hell had happened. Some of them probably thought I was making a fancy dinner or something, but I think they all figured it out when they saw the fire trucks parked outside. Eventually, Emily left, telling me she'd call me later to make sure I was okay. We didn't get to have our coffee date, but at least I didn't burn the building down. Honestly, I don't think I'll ever invite anyone over for coffee again, at least not without checking that my equipment is actually meant for coffee making. And yeah, now I'm the guy in the building who set off the fire alarm with his attempt at brewing coffee. So, lesson learned. Trying to impress someone by doing something out of the ordinary is only a good idea if you're actually competent at it. Otherwise, it might end up with you calling the fire department in front of your cute neighbor. TIFU by accidentally sending a love letter to my boss instead of my girlfriend. So, here's the thing. I've been working in my current job for about 2 years now. It's a good place, decent pay, and I like the people I work with. I'm in a position where I'm mostly working on spreadsheets, reports, and occasional emails, but there's a lot of room for personal interaction through messaging or calls. This was great for me because I had a lot of free time to text my girlfriend during the day, and that's exactly what I did until last week. Let me set the stage. It all started the night before, when I was in a particularly sentimental mood. My girlfriend and I had been together for about a year, and recently, things have been going wonderfully. We were planning a little weekend getaway, and I was feeling especially affectionate. So, I decided to write her a love letter. You know, one of those heartfelt notes that sounds way more romantic than your average text message. I spent a good chunk of the evening working on this letter, making sure it sounded just right. It was one of those letters where you try to capture everything you feel in a way that makes the person on the other end feel truly special. I wasn't worried about it being too cheesy or over the top because I know she'd appreciate it. I wanted it to be something she could look back on and smile at, even when things get tough. It took me about an hour, but I was proud of what I'd written. After typing the letter, I reviewed it, edited it, and then decided to send it via text. I'm not exactly great with pen and paper when it comes to important messages, so texting was my go-to. I hit send and went to bed, feeling accomplished and excited to see her reaction in the morning. Now, here's where things started to go downhill. The next day, I woke up and got into the office early. I had a busy day ahead with meetings and a few reports I needed to finish. But I decided to knock out some quick admin stuff first. My boss, let's call him Dave, is a nice enough guy, but he's also a little distant. We communicate through emails, Slack, and occasionally short texts when there's something urgent. But Dave is also the kind of boss who keeps things professional, and we've never had a personal conversation beyond work topics. This is important because I was a little careless when I went about my morning routine. The first thing I did when I sat down at my desk was check my phone. There, in my message inbox, was the love letter I had sent to my girlfriend the night before. I had planned on sending her a follow-up text later in the morning to say I was thinking about her, but that's when my brain made a classic mistake. You see, I often have Slack and my regular texting app open side by side on my phone. They both look almost identical in their layout, with just the slightest difference in color. So I want to check my messages. I didn't realize that I was still looking at my texting app and not Slack. You probably already see where this is going. I was in a rush to get some work done, and my mind was in that autopilot mode. I figured I'd send a quick work-related message to Dave, who had been asking for some updates on a report we were both involved in. So, without double-checking, I opened what I thought was the Slack window for Dave and hit paste. You guessed it. I pasted the love letter I had written for my girlfriend directly into the chat box. At first, I didn't notice. I was typing out a quick, hey, just following up on the quarterly report, but I was half focused on my email inbox at the same time. I hit send, and only then did I realize my mistake. The little bubble on Slack popped up with my message to Dave. I just wanted you to know how much I love you. From the moment I met you, my life has changed in the most beautiful ways. You have made me realize what true love is, and every day I spend with you, I am reminded of how lucky I am to have you in my life. I froze. I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. The reality of the situation started hitting me in waves. There was no way I could undo what I'd just done. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, trying to think of something clever to say, but I could already feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I could practically hear Dave reading the message in his head, probably with a confused and concerned expression. What was I even supposed to say? It wasn't just a slip of the finger. I'd sent a deeply personal message meant for my girlfriend to my boss. At that moment, I thought about calling in sick and just going home to bury my head under the covers, but I realized that wasn't an option. Dave had already read the message, and if I didn't address it immediately, it would just keep hanging over me. I took a deep breath and typed out the following response. Dave, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to send that message to you. That was meant for my girlfriend, and I was in the wrong chat. Please disregard it. I'll follow up with the report shortly. I hit send, immediately regretting my decision, but knowing I had no other choice. My stomach was in knots as I waited for his reply. My mind raced through all the potential outcomes. What would he think? Would he find it funny? Or worse, would he think I was completely unprofessional and fire me? It took what felt like an eternity, but finally, Dave replied. His message was short and to the point. No worries, I figured that wasn't meant for me. Hope everything's good with you and your girlfriend. I almost burst out laughing from sheer relief. While my face was still on fire from embarrassment, I was grateful that he seemed to take it well. But the moment didn't end there. It wasn't just the awkwardness of sending a love letter to my boss. The real kicker came later that afternoon. My girlfriend texted me back. "Oh, babe, your letter was so sweet. I can't wait to see you tonight. You always know how to make me feel special." I stared at her message for a moment before replying. "Thanks, babe. Glad you liked it. I'm actually dealing with a little bit of an embarrassing situation at work. I still haven't heard the end of it from my friends or coworkers. They think it's hilarious. I, on the other hand, will be double-checking every single message before I hit send for the rest of my life. TLDR, accidentally sent a heartfelt love letter meant for my girlfriend to my boss at work. Had to awkwardly explain myself, but thankfully my boss was understanding. TIFU by accidentally getting a stranger's dog adopted as mine. So this happened last weekend, and I still can't believe it. I'm a bit embarrassed, and honestly, I'm just waiting for the fallout. It all started when I decided to visit the local animal shelter because, well, I've been thinking about adopting a dog for a while. I've always loved animals, but I work long hours and wasn't sure if I was ready for the responsibility. After months of debating, I figured, why not go see what's available? Maybe just look around and get some info, no harm done. The shelter was one of those small, non-profit places, but they always have a pretty decent selection of animals. The moment I walked in, the first thing I saw was this adorable little terrier mix. He had these big, soulful eyes and the kind of scruffy, wiry fur that made him look like the dog version of a disheveled teddy bear. I fell in love at first sight. I've always been a sucker for the scruffy dogs. I asked the lady at the front desk about him, and she gave me the rundown. Apparently, he'd been abandoned by his previous owner. The dog was sweet, had a ton of energy, but needed a good home. The lady even mentioned he was good with other dogs, which was a huge selling point for me since I often dog sit for my sister, who has 2 dogs of her own. So I decided to meet him. They let me into the small, fenced yard in the back to interact with the dog. He was playful and immediately took a liking to me, jumping up and licking my hands. He was the perfect size, not too big, not too small, and I thought, yep, this is the one. I filled out the adoption paperwork on the spot and even paid the adoption fee, which I was told covered vaccines, neutering, and a basic training course. I was ecstatic. I texted my friends and family, telling them I was now the proud parent of a new dog. A few of them were super excited, others a little skeptical because of my work schedule, but I was convinced it would be fine. My new pup and I would figure out together. I drove home with the dog in the passenger seat, and he was so calm for the whole ride. I took him straight to the pet store and bought him everything: a leash, a collar, toys, food, and even a little bed for him to sleep in. I set everything up at home, and we spent the night bonding. It was a dream come true. The next morning, I decided to take him to the dog park. I thought it would be a good way for him to get out some energy and for me to see how he interacted with other dogs. At the park, there were a few people with their dogs, and we all started chatting. Everyone was super friendly, and I was telling them how I just adopted him from the shelter the day before. They all oohed and awed about how cute he was, and I felt like I was doing everything right. But then something weird happened. One woman, who was there with her golden retriever, suddenly stopped mid-conversation and looked at my dog like she had seen a ghost. She pointed at him and said, "Wait, that's Max, right?" I froze. Max. I had never heard the dog's name before, so I just nodded and said, "Yeah, that's what the shelter told me his name was." The woman's face changed. She looked concerned, even a little confused. She asked me, "Are you sure? Because that dog looks just like the one I lost last month. His name's Max. He's been missing for weeks now. I've been looking for him everywhere." I laughed nervously, thinking she must be mistaken. I told her I just got him from the shelter yesterday, and they didn't mention anything about him being lost. They just said he was abandoned. The woman wasn't convinced. She asked me if I could show her his paperwork, and I agreed, thinking maybe she was just worried and needed some reassurance. I pulled out the adoption papers and showed her. She skimmed over them quickly before her eyes widened. This is not the right paperwork," she said. "This dog's paperwork doesn't match his description. You need to call the shelter." My heart sank. I had been so caught up in the excitement of adopting a dog that I hadn't really questioned any of the details. The shelter had told me everything was in order, but now this woman was making me second-guess everything. I had no idea what was going on. I quickly left the dog park and called the shelter. I spoke to one of the staff members who told me they didn't have any record of the dog being lost, but they'd look into it and get back to me. I was starting to get a sinking feeling in my stomach. A few hours later, the shelter called me back. Apparently, the dog I had adopted, who I had been calling Max all this time, wasn't even the dog I thought he was. He wasn't an abandoned pup at all. The shelter had mixed up his paperwork, and I had actually adopted someone else's missing dog. The staff member was apologetic, but told me that they had no idea how the mix-up happened. They had just taken the dog in, thinking he was abandoned, but his real owner had been looking for him for weeks. I was in complete shock. The woman at the park was right. This was her dog, Max. I had accidentally adopted him under false pretenses. To make matters worse, the shelter told me they would have to come to pick up the dog and return him to his rightful owner. I was devastated. The dog had been with me for less than 24 hours, but I already felt so attached to him. I cried, I'll admit it. I was heartbroken at the thought of having to give him up. The woman at the park, who had been so calm at first, was clearly relieved when I told her the truth. She thanked me profusely, saying that she had been searching for Max for weeks. She even promised to send me a thank you card, which felt a little weird but nice. The shelter came that afternoon to pick him up and reunite him with his real owner. It was the right thing to do, but it didn't make it any easier. After the whole ordeal, I went home, sat on my couch, and cried some more. I felt guilty for adopting a dog that wasn't mine, for not double-checking his background, and for thinking that I was actually giving a homeless dog a better life when in reality, he was just lost and had a loving family waiting for him. I'm still hoping that one day I'll be able to adopt a dog the right way. I've learned my lesson to be much more careful with the adoption process and to always double-check the details. I never want to go through something like that again. But for now, I'm still processing the fact that I accidentally got someone else's dog adopted as mine. It's one of the most surreal and awkward things that has ever happened to me, and I'm still a little shaken by the whole situation. TLDR, adopted a dog, only to find out it was someone else's missing dog. The shelter gave me the wrong paperwork, and I accidentally reunited the dog with its real owner after only 24 hours. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.